cause a few people to be a little bit more careful in how they try and treat trusted servants of our government and of our people to tell the truth. I just feel that it's a little irresponsible of people to, especially after so many years, to bring up subjects that have been explained rather thoroughly, especially in our case in debriefings.
Other people with their habitation, we can keep track. If there's something very important to be developed from the moon, I'm not sure what it is right now, and I sure think we should identify what it is for America to make such gross expenditures again for human habitation on the moon. We can help, we can join with, together we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
So what is it, Buzz? Please tell us. What do you know? Why did your memory escape you on Coast to Coast when you had a 3-minute interview for that other documentary maybe filmed a year previously? It said you saw something you couldn't explain out of your Apollo craft window. How very strange. These people have such a memory lapse, and then starts talking about a monolith on Phobos. Wow. There's a saying, it's all part of the muddle-up, to keep you in a state of being able to say, well, I can't really be sure about this. Because if you're unsure, you won't do anything. Edgar Mitchell. Mitchell first mentioned in his book, a 1996 book, The Way of the Explorer, that he had spoken to people who he trusted, and they said they knew of crashed craft and bodies being recovered. And he went on camera to say this in 2003 in a documentary called Out of the Blue. Compare this with earlier remarks to David Sereda, which are included in Sereda's own documentary evidence, the case for NASA UFOs, and I've got those two cuts here for you.
Until the current period, or until the last 30 years, it was conventional wisdom, both in science and theology. We're alone in the universe, the single repository of life anywhere in the known universe. Well, no one believes that anymore. I went into space to learn about the universe we live in, to get new insights, to go beyond the boundaries of our known existence.
Look okay?
Apollo 14 astronaut and 6th man on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, states in his book, The Way of the Explorer, that he's never had first-hand experience with UFOs. However, he has met with credible professionals within 2 governments who have testified to their own first-hand experiences with close encounters during their official duties.
The only people I know of that claim to have been in that position are former intelligence, military, and government people, and some contractor people, whose official duties in the early days were to investigate this and know about it. Those people were under, at that time, great restrictions and high security clearance that prevented them from telling the general public about it.
Edgar Mitchell holds a PhD from MIT and stands to be a perfect candidate in this particular NASA UFO investigation. Mitchell says his research, including conversations with people who have worked in intelligence agencies and military groups, have convinced him that the American government has covered up the truth about UFOs for 50 years. I thought if I sent Edgar Mitchell the tether footage from STS-75 that he could clearly see that we were looking at the largest UFOs ever captured on film. I wrote Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell in October of 1999. On November 24th, 1999, Edgar Mitchell wrote me the following letter. David Sarita, yes, I have received your film and reviewed it and the info package you provided. I see utterly nothing about the tether incident that is particularly interesting. If there is more revealing footage, then I will look at it. However, I have looked at many feet of space film and have yet to see only one that has anything worth looking into regarding UFO appearances. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. I could not accept the idea that such a great proponent of UFOs was so adamantly against the suggestion that these giant circles passing behind the tethered satellite were UFOs. He was shrugging off the most astounding piece of video ever witnessed of UFOs in the history of the space program. I couldn't believe it. Dr. Mitchell, who was an MIT PhD, could not even acknowledge that the discs were clearly going behind the 12-mile length of the tether. He couldn't even see that very simple fact. I think just about any moron can tell the difference between when a disc is going behind this piece of wood and when it's going in front of it. That's in front, that is behind. This is not in front, this is behind. And that's exactly how they appear. Why couldn't Edgar Mitchell see this point? I decided to try to argue the points with Mitchell more precisely. He wrote me back almost immediately. David, at first glance they are just particles, perhaps outgassed. I do not know. But I certainly would look for a more prosaic explanation than UFOs. If you have a better film, I will look at it, but I am not very optimistic that they are anything exotic. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell wrote to me that he thought the objects were just particles, perhaps outgassed from the space shuttle. How does a particle appear to be visible from over 77 miles away? We're looking, the cameras on the space shuttle are at least 77 miles away and drifting past 100 miles. How do you see just little particles of dust floating by that appear as perfect giant circles with notches cut out of the side, clearly passing behind the tether, pulsing with very sophisticated wave patterns? How do particles behave like this? Maybe I have to relearn and reinvestigate particle theory to understand some of these ideas, these ridiculous ideas that some of these scientists are coming up with. He wrote me back the following letter on December 3rd, 1999. David Sarita, I remain open-minded, but I saw nothing on the tape you sent that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether. Also in the footage of the tether, the commentator on the spacecraft is making a running commentary. For really anything of significance in space around the tether at that time, don't you think they would have been saying something about it? If they were as big as you say, they would have been visible to the naked eye and surely reported, not ignored as seems to be the case. You comment about no infrared images. Of course not. If nothing is there, how could there be an infrared image? Signed, Edgar Mitchell.
I think you get the idea of that there. There is a bit more to that. That's a whole 2-hour-long documentary, I think maybe 3 hours with David Sarita, investigating what I think is the best evidence that UFOs, alien spacecraft, have been caught on NASA films. There's a lot of film of it, which is hardly ever talked about. And Mitchell is basically denying there's any anomalous objects on that footage from STS-75. And there are hundreds of anomalous objects. And you're going to see more of these shortly in the clip at the end. And we're now going to go on to Gordon Cooper. In fact, before we go on to Gordon Cooper, there's another film, there's a film called Astronauts Gone Wild. I was going to put a clip of Mitchell from Astronauts Gone Wild, but frankly it's just too bad to put in. It's just like embarrassing to watch. It really is. You know, it's just so bad. He basically ends up kicking somebody up the backside on this clip because of the questions that they ask him. Edgar Mitchell is not what he seems to be. Gordon Cooper, I think his testimony is the most significant and probably the only fully truthful one. The others are under orders to reveal that's what's going on. They're being given orders to reveal certain things, not others. That's the way that it works.
Sorry, Andrew, where was that film?
Which one?
What we just looked at. Where was that taken?
With the strange object, that's from STS-75, Space Shuttle Mission 75 in orbit, and I don't know the date. It will have been in the 90s sometime, I think. Late 80s or early 90s. You can go on YouTube, just put STS-75 tether footage, and you'll get the whole
What was that one thing?
That was the tether. They were doing an experiment with a satellite, and they wanted to put the satellite on a cable and see what the energy coming down the cable was. I don't know the exact details, but what happened was there was a huge discharge, and the cable broke, and this thing, sort of just ended up in a separate orbit, and it was surrounded by all these strange objects. And NASA just tried to say it was, dust particles and gas and stuff. And soon after that, they started to then heavily censor the footage. But again, you can go and look at that separately.
What about the possibility that there is indeed physical evidence of extraterrestrial visitations to Earth, perhaps locked away in the dark vaults of government secrecy? Astronaut Gordon Cooper is among several authorities who are unwilling to dismiss the theory as pure fiction. Cooper himself has heard rumors of crash saucers recovered by the military.
There was some accident involving a UFO, from there it varies greatly. There were occupants in each of the rumors that I've heard, but from there on it varies greatly as to whether they were all alive or some alive, or what the extent of damage was to them, and then as to what happened to them is quite variable. The particular rumors aren't necessarily from people who've been involved, but they come from so many different sources that it would lead you to believe that it certainly is worth investigating a little further. My personal feeling all along has been that I feel that the government should be honest with the citizens of the United States, and I think they really underestimate the intelligence level of the citizens of the country by continually hiding things from them.
And then we've got a clip from, again, from Out of the Blue.
In 1965, Gordon Cooper was the last American astronaut to go up into space alone.
What they think on it. Now the action that I have taken is to turn off my 05G switch fuse and my...
He orbited the planet 22 times.
I think that those of you that know me know that I've always spoken honestly and straightforward to you. I intend to do so today.
10 years earlier, while stationed at Edwards Air Force Base, Cooper witnessed an event that has yet to be explained nearly 50 years later. He was supervising the filming of a precision landing facility for F-86 fighter jets. Suddenly, a saucer-like craft flew directly over the cameraman. 3 landing gear apparatus opened, and the object landed on the dry lake bed.
They're just typical saucer shape, double lenticular shape, metallic. And they went out, picked up their cameras and moved on out toward him filming. And he lifted off, put the gear back in the well, and climbed out at a very high rate of speed and disappeared.
Cooper had the film footage of the strange craft developed. By the time it returned from processing, he had gone up through the ranks to report the incident.
Finally, with the colonel telling me to, when the film arrived at my desk, to put it in the carrier pouch. There would be a courier there at my office by that time already, and they'd arranged for him to fly in our base airplane back to Washington with these films.
Did you watch the film?
We didn't have a chance to run it. I had a chance to hold it up to the window and look at it. It was certainly a good film.
After the developed film was sent by plane to Washington, it was never seen or heard of again.
Did you ever keep in touch with anybody about it or discuss it?
How would I keep in touch with anybody about it? There's no way within the military or within the government of keeping track of something that is classified unless you're directly involved in it, and I was not.
So that, to me, is one of the most compelling disclosures of all, that he actually filmed this thing landing. Now, obviously, he didn't mention that in 1978, but he was probably still employed at that time, in the military or in some government job. So he would have been afraid of disclosing that information. By 2003, maybe it was 2001 when the interview took place, he had no problem disclosing the information. In fact, let's see. Yeah, it was 2004, October 2004 he died, so it wasn't long before his death. So summary of astronauts' disclosures. Aldrin has flip-flopped. He has switched between apparent disclosure and denial. You've seen that in the clips that I presented you. Mitchell is adopting a limited hangout, stating he knows or knew unnamed sources who told him stuff, which is what happens a lot. You get all these anonymous inside sources saying stuff, but he denies NASA's own video footage shows intelligently controlled objects. And I've got a bit more of this coming up. Cooper's disclosures seem to get greater over the years, with his disclosure of seeing film of a landing coming only 1 or 2 years before he died. Cooper was also dropped from the Apollo program in favour of Alan Shepard, though he was scheduled to head up the Mars program according to a 1996 interview with Michael Linden, of course, the Mars mission. My view is, and because Cooper apparently was a bit bitter about being dropped from the Apollo program, but I think I know why he was dropped. Because he was an honest guy, and they knew they wouldn't be able to tell him not to tell the truth about it. Because the Apollo mission certainly did not happen as we were told. No question.
I did hear that Cooper was supposed to have burned up all his manoeuvring fuel because in orbit, in the Apollo...
the Gemini, of course.
Gemini, rather.
Yeah.
He kept on manoeuvring to look at something.
Oh, I haven't heard that
story.
story.
The sun coming up, or
right.
He should have done further orbits, but he was
brought
down early because he exhausted most of his.
Well, I'm sure there's information in there. If you read about these missions, you'll probably find details like that, which are indicating there's something else there that they're not telling you.
Yeah.
Okay, a bit of civilian disclosure now, and this is from Travis Walton. And I think what I'm going to do is. I'm just going to play you the clip.
Just after sunset on the evening of November 5th, 1975, a 7-man crew was piling into a 4-wheel drive vehicle after finishing a day of woodcutting near the tiny northern Arizona community of Snowflake. One of the 7 men was Travis Walton, whose curiosity that night plunged him into a living nightmare he would never forget. Just before leaving the work area, the men in the Jeep watched a glowing object emerge from behind the trees. Travis opened a door to get a better view and continued watching, stunned with his companions.
The thing was about 90 feet away, about 20 feet in diameter, about 8 feet high. It was glowing a golden color, kind of like molten metal. I couldn't hear anything at first. It must have been because when I got closer I could hear it, but it was a high-pitched, intermittent sound and a low rumbling sound. It sounded like machinery or, a heavy mechanical sound. Very difficult to describe.
Travis got out of the vehicle and moved toward the object, despite cries from his friends for him to return. Walton assumed by the time he could get any closer, the object would be gone.
Just as I got up close, it started to move with a sort of a rocking motion, kind of like a spinning top, like when it's slowing down to fall over, except it wasn't spinning. It the same side stayed toward me, and when it started to move, it got real loud, and that really scared me. And I jumped down behind a log, and I looked up at this thing, and I decided then I was in a lot of danger and I was going to get the heck out of there. And I raised up to go. It's the last thing I remember. I raised up and I started to turn, and I was just about in a high crouch when, wham, I felt a numbing shock hit me. It kind of like in the head, and I went out. I was knocked unconscious.
His 6 co-workers, however, saw what Travis had not. A slender beam of intense light which shot from the craft and lifted Walton off his feet, knocking him to the ground. The rest of the crew sped away in panic, looking back to see the craft take off. But when they returned to see if Travis was all right, he was nowhere to be found. When Travis finally came to, he was weak, groggy, and in pain. Above him was a light. He assumed he was in a hospital bed, but as his blurred vision became clearer, he discovered he was wrong.
I felt something pressing on my chest. My shirt and my jacket pushed up, and there was this thing laying across it. It was about 4 or 5 inches thick. The thing extended down over my rib cage and down to my belt. And when I looked up and I saw this thing, it was gray. And I looked past the edge of it, and I saw something white. My eyes weren't focusing real good, and at first I thought it was a doctor, you know, white mask and cap. But when I got to where I could see, I saw this thing, and I just came unglued. I looked around me, and there was 3 of them. I just panicked. I became hysterical.
As his eyes became accustomed to the surroundings, Travis saw his captors in more detail.
They were about 4 feet 10. Had very large heads. No hair on their heads. No eyebrows. No whiskers or anything like that. They had very large eyes. Those eyes are something that really bothered me, worse than anything. The rest of their features were small. It was like small ears, small nose, small mouth, hardly any lips if they had any lips. I never saw them open their mouth. But they were wearing a long coverall type things. They were orangish tan. When I saw them, I struck out. I wasn't really a blow. I was so weak. I pushed this one on my right, and he fell back into another one. They felt kind of marshmallowy, kind of like fat, you know. Whereas, you know, when you push against somebody with muscle, it feels differently. But they seemed light, unexpectedly. And I jumped off the table there and staggered over into the corner. There was a bench across the wall, and I leaned there. I was really weak, and I was so scared, you know, I was shaking, and they started towards me. And I started just screaming at them, you know, telling them to keep away from me. And I reached over and I grabbed a thing off of the table. There was a bunch of things there, and there was a clear tube about maybe 1 inch in diameter, I don't know, 1.5 feet long. And I thought, it wasn't heavy like glass, and it was too light for a club, and so I wanted to defend myself, and so I hit it against the table to break it, you know, maybe get a sharp point, but it didn't break. But I lashed out at them with it, and I kept screaming. They only took a couple of steps, and they stopped.
After the creatures departed, Travis left the room through the same door, but went down the hallway in the opposite direction.
I came to a doorway on my right, and I went into this. I didn't go right in. I looked in, and it was a round room, a domed room, with a chair in the middle. And it was really funny about this room. It's really strange. It looked like, you know, I could see the walls and everything, the same as everything else in that place. It was all just this matte gray metal look. But when I went towards the chair, I didn't go towards the chair right away. I walked around towards the side because the chair was high-backed, and I was afraid that there might be one of those things sitting in that chair. So I went around there, and when I could see that there was nobody in the chair, I walked over to it. But the closer I got to the chair, the darker the room seemed. And I could start seeing points of light, like the stars. There was buttons there. You know, I did a stupid thing. I pushed some, you know, hoping to open the door or something. But when that didn't work, well, I got scared of doing that too, because it made the stars move. I turned, and there was a man standing in the doorway I came through. And this guy, I mean, he appeared human to me, you know, which was a big relief. And I ran up there and started asking him all kinds of questions. And he just smiled, kind of tolerant-like. And I assumed that maybe he couldn't hear me because he had the helmet on his head, a clear helmet. And so when he motioned for me, he took me by the arm. I went with him. I assumed I was being rescued.
Travis was led out of the craft and into a large hangar, where more human-like figures were present. He remembers their appearance this way.
They'd pass, you know, on the street, but they had a strange thing to their eyes. They were a light color, a golden hazel, you know. and they had a resemblance to each other, like a family, but not identical. There was one of them that was a woman, I could tell. Had longer hair and female shape. One of the men and the woman came over there and they put me on the table, and they put a mask over my face, and I started to resist, and they held me on the table and they put this mask on my face, and I reached up to pull it away, and before I could, everything went black.
Meanwhile, the other members of the woodcutting crew had reported Walton missing. Local police organized a search party, but no trace of Walton was found. The next thing he remembered, Travis was lying on the side of a road outside Heber, Arizona, 12 miles from Snowflake.
When I first regained consciousness, I was laying on the roadway, well, to the side of the road, more off than on, and my head was on my arm, and I saw a light, and I looked up in time to see it go off, which I think was either a light going off or a hatch closing, perhaps. Then I saw this object hovering there. It was a flattened sphere. I mean, it was shaped like a disc, but it was very shiny, chrome-like. I could see that reflecting everything around there, but not giving off any light. It was dark. And it was just there for a second, hovering about 4 feet off the ground, and then it just shot straight up. It was incredible how quick, without making a sound.
Travis staggered to a phone booth to call his family, who at first did not believe it was really him. But once convinced, they came to take him home. On the way, Travis received yet another shock.
We were riding back in, and they said something about everybody being worried about me. I can't remember the exact conversation, but I said, well, you know, it must have been a bad couple of hours or something, to reference the time or something like that. And they said, Travis, you've been gone for 5 days.
While recuperating, Travis was able to remember most of what had happened to him. A series of hypnotic regressions with Dr. James Harder from the University of California, however, enabled Walton to recall things with less anxiety and more detail.
Travis Walton's story was made into a film called Fire in the Sky. And it's a very good film. I recommend, if you haven't seen it, try and get hold of it. Important thing that's in the film that you must realise is what might be called the abduction sequence that Travis described has been completely changed. Completely. It's one of the most horrific pieces of film I've ever seen. The film doesn't show Travis walking around the ship and pressing a button on the control panel. It shows him being dragged through the ship by his feet by aliens and then put onto a table with this membrane which comes down from the ceiling and covers his entire body, and then the aliens poke holes in this membrane and start sticking needles in him. And when you've got an incredible story which is documented in the police record like Travis Walton's, and the film documents well how his buddies became suspects in his murder, why are you going to need to change this incredible abduction tale? And what Travis thinks happened was, the craft had come down, he jumped out to see it, and they didn't realise he was there. They powered up the energy system which propelled the ship, and he was injured in that power up. And then they realised it, and they went back, took him up, and then they fixed him up and dropped him off. In the film, he is shown arriving naked, cowering on the ground. He describes no such thing in his real account. He describes having a growth of 5 days of beard, I think, to read his full account. So why did Hollywood want to change it?
Demonise the aliens.
It won. Now, I wanted to show you this film. This is very short, because this is one of the most astounding pieces of film that I've seen in quite a while. Some of you might have already seen this, but around the time, why I'm making a point of this is the UK press preferred to discuss the MOD releasing some dull documents which said that some soldiers or Air Force men had seen these strange objects when they were flying, and Nick Pope talked about those rather than this film. Nick Pope is a disinformer. He does not want you to learn the truth about the extraterrestrial question. Much as you may disagree with that, that's what the evidence shows. Much of the discussion of the MOD releasing dull documents occupies many UFO pundits and the media and so on. Go figure. This is what they should be talking about.
inteligente. Vea usted esta extraordinaria investigación con Johanan Díaz.
Un día después de que le presentamos el video del ovni expulsor de esferas captado en satélite en el municipio de Naucalpan, Estado de México, el pasado 22 de mayo a las 17:15 horas por el caza ovni Pedro Hernández, llegó a la redacción de los grandes misterios del tercer milenio Alfredo Carrillo, quien ese mismo día checaba la cámara de video High 8 que acababa de comprar, y estando en la azotea de su casa en el Coña, va de un lado para otro y es cuando regresan a ella 4 posibles esferas. Aquí, una comparación con el video de Pedro Hernández que dura 2 minutos con 40 segundos y el de Alfredo 2 minutos con 5 segundos. Con la filmación de Hernández, el sol le pega de frente a estos objetos y por ello se ven amarillos rojizos. Recordemos que está atardeciendo y que fue tomado desde la parte norte, mientras que Carrillo lo toma a contraluz desde Azcapotzalco. Estos dos lugares están separados en línea recta por cerca de 6 a 8 kilómetros. Para el minuto 1 con 36 segundos pasa por el lugar un segundo avión. Podemos darnos cuenta cómo el testigo tiene que bajar la toma para que no le pegue de frente en los rayos solares. Podemos concluir que se trata del mismo objeto en ambos videos por las siguientes comparaciones. 1. La expulsión masiva de objetos presumiblemente esféricos en ambos videos. Aquí lo sincronizamos, vea usted la similitud. 2. Mientras Pedro utiliza todo el zoom posible de su cámara y se aboca a grabar al más grande, Alfredo abre la toma y podemos ver la dirección que toman las esferas y que mantienen un patrón. 3. En ambas filmaciones se percibe cómo este ovni gira en su parte central y nunca pierde su tamaño y forma. 4. Es la filmación ovni perfecta, ya que tenemos el nombre de los testigos, estuvimos en el lugar de los hechos y contamos con los videos que a nivel mundial han causado una gran sensación.
Well, I think you get the idea of that. So the questions I'm asking is not what the military have seen and flying around. What the hell was that? And what the hell happened to Travis Walton? Who did he meet? Those are the questions I want answered. We ain't going to get the answers. You have to find those answers yourself. You ain't going to get them from any official source. Because the people that know about this are keeping it covered up. So I see a pattern of disclosure here. Because in 2007 we saw a clear effort to link UFOs to national security. A recent Larry King Live programme around that time had 2 Disclosure Project witnesses, Captain Robert Salas and Dr. Robert Jacobs, talking about interference with nuclear weapons. Dr. Robert Jacobs has been talking of his experience since 1982, when he filmed, I haven't got this clip in here, but he filmed, that his team filmed a saucer knocking out a dummy warhead from, it was a nuclear weapons test in 67, from Amiwito. He'd been talking about this since 1982. CNN put it on TV in 2008. It's only taken 26 years to cover this story. Why? There is a reason. Everything that comes on the TV on a mainstream source comes on for a reason. And why was there now such a flurry over Edgar Mitchell? Because he was even reported, I think, in the Daily Mail about a year ago in relation to the alien bodies and stuff. Why now? He's been talking about it for 12 years. Why now? Disclosure is happening. We've seen some